The fear and panic that diaspora elections brings to many immigrant folks like us is real. The feelings that folks are going through right now in America and many parts of the world, especially when right-wingers take charge, is palpable. Personally, I have survived about 4 presidents since I've lived in the US, starting with George Bush through to Obama to Biden to Trump and all that stuff. And I've seen the pendulum swing from left to right. And for my viewers who are not familiar with American politics, I would say that what is usually described as the left is usually made up of people who hold liberal or progressive views, or those who quote unquote welcome change, while those on the right often are described as conservatives on the conservative end of the spectrum. And of course, this is an oversimplified explanation. If you want to learn more, please read about it. I don't think 10 minutes is enough for us to explore all of that. And of course, between the left and right, there's everybody in between. And for me, I think personally, the most annoying group is the one that they typically call swing voters. I've never understood how these people think, but they hold a lot of power in America. Pretty much, I think they get to decide American elections. So anyway, this video is not necessarily about American politics per se. I just want to talk about the implications of elections like the one we just had. All over the world, there are elections, and more recently, it feels like we've had a big swing towards the right, that many countries are electing more and more conservative right-wingers to be in charge of their countries in spaces that we also live. And so some of my viewers have actually asked me to talk about this topic. I don't enjoy talking about politics at all, but given the moment, I will indulge them. So welcome to Long Beach, friends. Typically, we film from Karateng, an amazing village in Kisumu in Western Kenya. But I recently came back to the US for a little while to do some business, including voting, which is exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm already filling in stuff, and there's lots of things that I have to look up because there's some things that I need to read more about before I vote. And that's what I'm doing in my house right now. And thankfully in California, they make voting very, very easy. I never have to line anywhere. They simply mail us our ballots in the home, get it from my mailbox, fill it up, and then I drop it off right in my neighborhood. So anybody in California who qualifies should really vote because they make it extra easy. In some states, it's a whole different story. So the other good thing about California is that they even allow you to do same-day registration. That means on the election day, you can simply show up, register, and vote. So I couldn't imagine any other reason why somebody would not want to vote. So anyway, as you all know, the 2024 American elections is over. It is what it is. Some people are extra happy, while many people are really sad, disappointed, and scared. And in fact, Americans pretty much have elections every year. Typically, you have the 4-year cycle where they do like the presidential elections, then you have the midterm elections, and then sometimes you have like off-season elections in between. So it's this perpetual climate of election every year, and I find it incredibly exhausting. Now, for political junkies, I think that is fun. Personally, I draw no joy in things election. So usually I do my part. And once that is done, I make sure that politics occupies the least amount of my time within a day. So like recently, one of my friends was running for school board, and for the first time I actually contributed to a political campaign, and I would canvass and all that. But once it's all done, I keep politics at a very tight corner, so it doesn't really occupy much of my world during the day. And for the most part, this is a coping mechanism, because politics is always very stressful. Rarely do I enjoy politics. It's been many years since I last had fun with elections. In fact, in Kenya, the last time I voted was probably in 2002, which is almost 22 years ago. And so politics is not something I enjoy, but I know it's a reality of life. I need to be part of it, and I do my part. Once my part is done, that's it. So anyhow, Over the last four or five presidents, I've seen these circles move again from Democrats or Republicans and all that stuff. And with those changes, I see lots of hopes and disappointment. For example, when Obama was elected, many of us expected the US to have very special relationship with Kenya. We even thought they would simply just look for us in the villages and just give us visas without interviews. And I think maybe the exact opposite happened. In fact, Kenya was not even the first country he visited when he was president. So for Kenyans in US and other immigrants living in the US, many of our feelings around elections revolve around five things. Number one, it's always immigration. Number one, primary thing. Number two, foreign policy, where we hope our countries can have better relations. And then economy, depending on who is going to be in charge. And then sometimes we're talking about issues of ethnic ties. Like when you have President Obama running, we were really invested because that is a person we could relate to. Now, then the last one, again, social issues, which often don't rise very high for most Kenyans, but yes, people talk about them. And I'm talking about things such as gay marriage, abortion, quote unquote, school choice, and things like that. But for the most part, the most prominent issues are usually around immigration and foreign policy. So generally, when Democrats win, people in my community often expect relaxed immigration enforcement, additional pathways to legal immigration, closer ties with Africa or Kenya in general, or better economy. Because nobody really wants a terrible economy, regardless of who is in charge. And then, of course, you expect liberal social policies. And when Republicans come in, like now they're coming in full swing, typically people expect tighter immigration controls, budget cuts, particularly for education and health and human services. America spends the biggest chunk of their budget on military. So they would actually cut budgets for schools and put more money in the military. But that's a discussion for another day. And then, of course, we expect tax cut for rich people or business folks when Republicans are in charge. And then lastly, a lot more conservative policies when you think about things like religion, LGBTQ, and all that stuff. And these things really generate a lot of fear and anxiety in many of our communities. And also, surprisingly enough, there's a very small group of Kenyans living in Kenya who get excited when they hear that things are about to get tough for Kenyan in America. I've never understood what that is all about, but yes, there's a very small group of Kenyans that enjoy the news that, yeah, we're about to begin suffering here. But somebody can explain what that is all about. But in general, though, all elections have consequences. In Kenya right now, we are obviously living with the consequences of our previous election, and the majority of Kenyans are really pissed. And the same is also true in America, that when people elect some folks, you can expect changes, good or bad. In America particularly, these changes are often very pronounced amongst folks who are either undocumented or folks who are working to bring family members, students, educators, and other folks who are on temporary visas of some kind. And personally, I have experienced these fears, especially before I became a US citizen. I went through a lot of fear and terror when George Bush and the other Republicans were in charge. When you watch news and all you see is people being deported, the arrests being made, and it's really terrifying. There were nights I could barely sleep. So while the fear is often justified and unavoidable, I have come to learn years later that really it was not worth it. Looking back, it really probably was not worth it. And here's why. Number one, Democrats and Republicans are much more similar on the issues that I just mentioned than we realize. For example, many people are surprised to learn that President Obama actually deported more people than Trump, when it was Trump, and still is Trump, who is talking about deporting folks. Same thing with Biden. President Biden actually has deported way more people than Trump. And of course, the probability of you being deported does not significantly increase as much as we think. So all this talk about immigration, deportation, and all that, a lot of it is really bluster. Those are just things that they use to drive people to the voting booth. And so statistically speaking, I am convinced that the probability of you being deported is not that high. And so I think you'll be okay. So I can't guarantee anything, but given what I've seen over the last almost 20 years, I think you'll be okay. And of course, Americans, particularly American politicians, love the quote unquote broken immigration system. And here's why. Number one, the so-called broken immigration system brings them very cheap labor. Lots of folks who come here and work for very cheap. And when we work as immigrants without documentation, we pay taxes. And especially when we use other people's social security numbers, we pay taxes into the social security system, and we are never going to be able to get that money back. They love it. And of course, through undocumented immigration, they maintain their population, because immigrants have babies, and babies that are typically born in the US become immediate US citizens. So they actually like it when more people are coming back. However, when they're on TV trying to get votes, they always, all of them, act as if illegal immigration is one of the worst things ever, when they actually love it. In fact, Donald Trump himself has a history of hiring undocumented workers. So what you see on TV is often very different than what is in reality. So the real danger for many folks out here who are really terrified are a couple. So I'll just highlight a few of them. Number one, typically when Republicans are in charge, we can expect things to slow down in terms of legal pathways to allow people to become citizens or documented. I remember many years ago, they would actually let students join the military after 2 years and become US citizens within months. There's a program, I think they used to call it MAVNI. And when Trump came in, they stopped that. So students can no longer do that. And then especially during the Trump period, there are heightened or a lot more race-based attacks that typically happen, because somehow bigots and racists have been really emboldened to do some things that they would never do were it not for this climate. And so in some spaces, you can already start seeing bigots really doing some really nefarious stuff around. So that can happen. And then one of the other fears for some of us who are professionals in places like education and health is we expect budget cuts. Because typically Republicans have no problem cutting budgets for education, health, and human services, while increasing budgets for tax cuts and for military and things like that. So they're not often very friendly for those of us who work in fields where we care for people. So those are real problems that we can expect whenever Republicans are in charge. But in any case, these things can be worse depending on where you live. For example, we live in California, and for the most part, I think we'll be okay. Those of us who live in more conservative states run by complete right-wing nut jobs, their realities might be very different, because Republicans in charge in Washington would just let them do whatever. And so I feel bad for folks who live in conservative states, but those who live in progressive states like New York, Washington, California, Oregon, for the most part, you will be okay. So again, as I said earlier, looking back at how much time I spent sleepless nights watching people like Lou Dobbs, watching Fox News and getting terrified, it really was not worth it. So the first thing I'm going to advise you, if you're worried and terrified, please stop watching news. Personally, I've actually even muted friends who post anything politics. If you post politics, I mute you. We're still friends, but I don't want to see anything. So what that allows me is that I actually go through most of my day without even thinking about what's going on politically. Because I've done my part, there is nothing I can do right now to change anything. So as a coping mechanism, I keep that away from my daily reality. So please stop watching news. Don't talk about it. Focus on the things that give you joy, because I know you're already doing what you need to do to be in a safer place. Now, that said, the truth is that there's a large segment of people in the Western world that always hate Black people. And this is one of the main reasons I'm a very strong proponent of people returning back to our motherland. And I don't care if you're Kenyan, if you're from other place, I am a very big proponent of Black people coming back. And I'm not saying that because Kenya is perfect. No, Kenya and Africa is far from perfect. But I strongly believe that we can create a paradise that would work for you and me and for our children. So again, my heart goes out to people who are terrified, but please know that you will be okay. I hope this was useful, and I will see you in the next. Thank you. Bye.